If you're curious to hear a little music from our guest Carla Lucero, who we spoke to in our most recent episode, check out E4TT's annual concert of music by women and non-binary composers, Midnight Serenades, on January 25th. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our conversation with Nina Shekhar, who we spoke to in December 2023. Your piece, Redact, attempts to capture the way the human brain reacts to trauma. And you can skip this question if you want, but was there a specific event or person or something that inspired you to write it, to go in that direction? How did the subject and approach affect your compositional process?
There were a number of incidents that informed that piece. That piece I wrote in 2019, this was kind of reflecting after 2017 was like Me Too, like kind of reflecting after that, and experiences I had, without going into too much detail, but I think I was thinking about that, and ideas of consent and things like that related to the piece, but also what ended up happening with that piece is it was like a acoustic performance. It was like a live thing performed with the ensemble, but I kind of had a sense from that it wasn't quite in its final form. Like it needed to be in a different form. And I had a friend her name is Chen, Xuan, who's a really amazing video artist, and we had become really good friends about just related to our similar experiences just as Asian Americans. And it was kind of right before 2020 and like the pandemic, when a lot of Asian Americans were kind of experiencing a lot of violence, at that time. But, we had talked about experiences that we had had before then. And she ended up making a video for the piece and kind of relating to some of her own experiences that she's had, and thinking about trauma also in like a cultural sense. And so I think it was a combination of all those memories and different factors that informed, the way both of us looked at the work and how we made this. And yeah, it was just a very rewarding experience getting to share that with her, because it's like, again, it felt like a safe space. We had a lot of similar experiences, and we were also very protective of each other. And if somebody wasn't comfortable with sharing things, then we kind of let that. We were like, okay, that's fine. And so yeah, it was a very safe, collaborative experience in a way that might not have been the same in like a live performance setting with if I had it for an ensemble where they were just performing at one time and didn't have enough rehearsal time, like it wouldn't have felt the same as it did like making a video out of it and like spending a lot of extended time over it together. So yeah, I think it kind of shifted just the way I even thought about the piece when I had that collaborative experience with her.
Very nice. Yeah, I laughed at with not enough rehearsal time, because we do all these really hard pieces, and you come into rehearsal, you prepared your part, and if you're lucky, you'll get a few rehearsals, right? And then but it never seeps into your bones, right?
Exactly. And I think that's just like the concert model. We're constantly doing the next thing, and then we have our rep for that concert, and we just never have enough time to really dive deeper into it and really understand the full expression of a piece and what are all the different angles we can tackle it, like just from a performer mindset, but also just, emotionally. Like a lot of pieces are very complex and there's so much work that goes into it. And I think it's just hard to be able to have that time in most concert settings where you have like one afternoon and there's like a ton of logistics and like setup and all that kind of eat away at that creative experience that could be there. So I think that's something that I've been thinking about more as I move through the field, is how can I find ways to preserve that sense of, communal experiences, that sense of time, that sense of close collaboration that sometimes gets taken away, in these concert settings.
Right, right. It's the cost of the whole situation that ends up driving the bus, and that's tricky. Have you tried in other of your pieces? You said you're working with multimedia, so have you tried this pairing of imagery with the music where it's embedded in the kind of construction and exploration?
Yes, I've been doing a lot of that actually in the last few years. As I said, like post-pandemic, I think it really shifted the way I think about art making because, live concerts weren't happening then. It kind of forced me to think, well, what else can happen?
Right.
So yeah, I've been doing a lot of video work recently. I think the largest work I did was that piece I was talking about with Bollywood and
Mm-hmm.
incorporating some Bollywood samples and kind of exploring like brown sexuality, I would say, like Indian um like cultural values around sexuality, and that piece is called Hate the Sin, Love the Sinner. And it
Oh,
was kind of thinking about, the idea of sexuality and being like a sin, and kind of questioning that, and also thinking about, ideas of queer identity, and so often that phrase is used to kind of invalidate queer identity, and kind of trying to reclaim that phrase. So um, this piece was an expression of all these things, and ended up making a video for it because um, it was funny. It was like an orchestra piece actually. First, it was like an orchestra and electronics piece, and then I I kind of wanted to also be able to do it as like a solo version, with myself
mm-hmm.
performing it. And
Ooh,
so for that, yeah. So for that, I was like, oh, I want to make a video for it. So I made this long multimedia kind of project for this. I even was recently I did it even with like interactive lighting, which was a whole
wow.
thing. But yeah, what ended up happening is the orchestra liked the video and wanted to use it also. So even though it wasn't really like what I had thought was going to happen, but
Yeah.
it worked well. So um I think, with that, I've been doing a lot more multimedia works like that. And I also have done smaller video projects. Like I did actually another one I did was a video piece related to Gloria Estefan, and then thinking about um I guess the relationship of like me and my body, and the way watching her, like another performer, the way that she, carries herself on stage and her relationship with her body. And, I'd seen in interviews that she was actually very like insecure about her body growing up, and was very shy, very nervous on stage, like very self-conscious, and yet she kind of took on this larger than life persona. And so this piece is kind of related to that, like thinking about Gloria Estefan, clips of her and the way she carries her body, and then kind of with me also, like me trying to mimic, I was kind of mimicking even like TikTok culture, like when you have these side by side dance videos, and but kind of thinking of it more from like a body image standpoint. Like so often we're comparing ourselves in the media to other people. And yeah, it became a very personal project because I had to record myself also
Oh,
dancing, which I'm very nervous about. But yeah, it was like a really interesting kind of video project for me to do. And yeah, so I've been doing a lot more of that recently. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been another way for me to, like another dimension for me to explore artistically beyond just thinking about music and sound.
Yeah, and I think it's the direction that we're all going in some way or another. The culture is so visual, and we've got all this technology that makes the visual so accessible that I think it's a mistake not to explore it in some ways. Not every
Yeah.
time, but at least a lot of times, and
Right,
kind of
right.
see
It's like
that.
another sensory experience that people can have, and um, kind of a shame to, ignore like other different angles that we can have and use to explore just our own creative practice.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Nina Shekhar, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.